YouTube Vinyl community, Beach Boys, Smile fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. We are joined here today by Coffee Table Vinyl, Sean himself. Sean, how's it going, buddy?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so stoked to talk to you about Smile. I know you're a huge fan of this record. You've had that box set much longer than I've had, the physical one.
Really?
Um,
Longer than you?
I just got mine like a year ago. The big,
Oh,
the
cool.
big, the big
Yeah,
vinyl box set. That thing up
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
I couldn't afford it when it came out. It took years to find one that was cheap.
Well, I'll let you into a secret. I couldn't afford it either. It was gifted to me.
That's
So,
the best way to get it. Yes.
yeah, yeah, completely.
Yeah, I put out a video recently where because I got this thing for super cheap and I had to clean it up because it was just trash.
I remember it now. Yeah, I saw the video. Yeah,
It's got a
so
nice loving home now, which is
you
great.
did a good job on that one.
So I want to talk to you about Smile as we're doing this month. And my first question for you is the myth, the legend, the story of Smile.
Uh,
Does that overshadow the music for you, or does that sort of play the same pivotal role as the music? Are they both important, or what kind of strikes you about the record?
um, well, okay, for me, uh, I find like a lot of people, you find out about this. I've discovered this way before the Smart Session came out.
Yeah,
So you read about it in books and you hear little snippets here and there, and it's like you say, it's a myth, isn't it? There's a lot of mythology around it, and yeah. So for me, the myth, the music, kind of matched up with the myth. Once I finally heard the thing, it was completely everything I expected it and wanted it to be. Really,
right.
it's and the two go hand in hand, right? You know, it's it's as much, well, maybe not so much for people now because it's all there. You can go and just listen to it all. But before that, you had the internet, you had little dark corners of the internet where you could find a piece of one track and then and a bit of another, and everyone made their own mixes and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Those days are
yeah,
gone.
listening to those tracks for the first time after reading about them, it's like kind of blows your mind a bit, doesn't it?
How did you discover Smile? Because everyone I've ever talked to, and I say this in each video, we all have a different
I know.
Smile story. So did someone tell you about it? Did you read about it in a book? How did it come up for you?
I'm trying to think. It was probably a magazine. I
Yeah.
used to. I've got a few like somewhere tucked away. I've got a few old. I think it was Mojo magazines. I don't know
Love
if you
Mojo.
get that in the States. Yeah.
Oh, I've got a collection of them. I love them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it was. I think I was reading about Holland on there, and I think there was a mention of Smile a couple of times in the article.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on this; it might not be the case, but
I, it might be. I don't know.
I feel like I remember hearing a few mentions of this SMiLE album. And I'm thinking, hey, what's that? I think by this point, I think I'd collected all of the two for one CD set. And
Yep.
I'm thinking, there's no Smile. There's Smiley Smile. There's this thing called Smiley Smile. What's that? Is that the same thing? Are they talking about that? That's kind of how you find out about it, isn't it?
Yep.
So yeah, then it was like, okay, so Smiley Smile is not the real thing. It's there's this other album out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I think I read a couple of books after that, not long after, which obviously go into a bit more detail. And by that point, I think I was just like, right, I need to hear this. I need to find some of this. So
Did you
yeah,
read
that's
did you hear Smiley Smile first?
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Smiley Smile. Yeah, I got really into the band probably maybe 2000, 2001,
Yeah.
something like that.
Right when they came
And
out. Those two proceeded
yeah.
new at that time. Yeah.
Oh, is that when they were out? Was
Yeah.
it?
Brandon. Well,
I
the second wave of them. Yeah.
The timing was perfect then because I just started buying them because I was working this job where I was just listening to music all day on my mini disc player,
Oh,
and I was running out of music to the yeah, this that dates it, right?
for the young people watching, mini disc was a thing that had music on it or data.
It was cool.
You're awesome,
and
man.
uh, and I ran out of music, and I was sort of so I asked my dad. I said, "Have you got any mini discs I can borrow?" And he's like, here's a couple. Take one of those to work with you." 20 Golden Greats was one of
Oh,
them.
Yeah.
So that got me into them. And then from then I was like, right, I need to listen to more of this stuff. And I went through and bought all the CDs. So
God, that's
Smiley
cool.
Smile was part of that, yeah. So way
Like,
before I heard Smile, maybe like 2 or 3 years before I heard Smile. So
I was about the same with SMiLE because the like I think I got
yeah.
into the actual SMiLE right around or before Brian Wilson Presents SMiLE came out because there was so much talk about it. Like
Yes, yeah,
I
yeah,
knew
yeah.
about it as a kid, like growing up reading Beach Boys books and stuff. I knew what SMiLE was, but when
Yes,
you were a kid, you didn't know how to look up music or bootlegs or anything.
of course.
You didn't know
Yeah.
anything about that. So it's
No
like,
chance. Yeah.
and then when the internet came out for like downloading music, you're like, oh, I can download music. So like there was like bits and pieces floating around at that point, but nothing concrete. So like when Brian Wilson Presents SMiLE came out, it was like, oh my God, you can like go buy SMiLE at the store, you
Yeah.
know?
That
And
was
then
a big
eventually the
deal.
box set coming out was like mind blowing because now you have like everything there, which is for me, it kind of kills the magic, but it also makes the magic that much more interesting because you have so much to dig into.
You can
Um,
digest so much, can't you?
yeah,
There's yeah.
it's just far out, man. So like one thing I've been asking everyone is to contextualize SMiLE if it had come out in
Uh,
'67. People were, only a couple years before buying their big hit singles, Barbara Ann, California
mhm.
Girl, Set Miranda.
Yeah.
How do you think the young audience would have reacted to an album with songs like "Do You Like Worms" or "Vegetables" or "Cabin Essence"? Like picking up their new record and being like, "What is this?" Like, do you think the critics would have loved it and the fans would have been, or what do you think would have happened?
I think exactly what you just said. I think personally, I think the critics would have seen the greatness in it, but I think people are going to listen to that and think, well, what's this?
Yeah,
Because you, I mean, you've got something to compare it to because you've got Smiley Smile. They're not the same album, but you've got tracks from it, and
yeah,
there's always that story. Well, not the just well, there is a story about it, but heroes and villains and the kind of uh, the way it was kind of expected to follow up Good Vibrations and be this big song, and it people didn't get it, did they? It wasn't quite.
weird song.
Yeah, I love it.
That's great, but it's like not really a
but
single.
it's not when you think of like Good Vibrations, it's like the perfect pop song, isn't it? And it's innovative and it's got all of these like wild new recording methods and it's literally a perfect song, isn't it?
Yeah,
And that was obviously huge. That was like a million seller or whatever it was,
the
wasn't it?
biggest song
So
of the time. Yeah,
exactly. And then you get heroes and villains after that. So the anticipation is like, wow, what are they going to do next?
yeah.
And I guess you're expecting a commercial pop song that's great, and you get heroes and villains, and it's like what? So
You're right. I think that's the difference between Good Vibrations and Heroes and Villains. Is Good Vibrations, even though it was as weird and funky as
yeah,
it was still a pop song with conventional pop structure. You had a good
and
sing-along
lyrics,
chorus
and
stuck in your head.
yeah,
Heroes and
yeah.
Villains, you can't really digest that song as quick as you can with Good Vibrations. That first
No,
line,
no,
you
no.
know.
It can
uh,
it can get into your head. It's
oh yeah,
a it's an earworm, but you don't know what. The first few times I listened to that, I really didn't get it myself. Like
yeah,
we're listening to that on compilation albums and things before I listened to it in its context.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
kind of thinking that's one of those kind of weird ones. I'll come back to that later. you know,
I was the
I'm
same
all
way.
about like at the time I was all about the hits, right? So
Yeah.
I'm listening to that and I'm thinking this isn't a hit to me. It's a strange song. Right? It's kind of cool, but
I mean that's my recollection when I was a kid. My brother had a cassette tape called Made in the USA. It was the greatest hits album. And
uh,
I don't remember the exact track listing, but that was the only place we had Heroes and Villains was on that tape.
yeah,
And whenever it would pop up, we'd both be like, "What is this creepy, weird song? Like, what is this bizarro magic world?" Like, because I
it,
think the
it,
song before it was like Surf and Safari or something. Then it goes into Heroes and Villains. You're like, "What the hell happened?"
it's such a departure, right? From like
Yeah, and it took me a long time to appreciate it because when you're a kid, you want to hear the fun stuff, and then this creepy weirdo song comes on, and you're like, "What the hell is this?" Um,
if only they had She's Going Bald on there or something like that.
everyone's favorite classic greatest hits Beach Boys song. She's going bald. Love that
Yeah,
song though.
great.
When you look at their discography, where does SMiLE? I contextualize SMiLE as being an actual album. Yeah, it didn't come out, but we know it's there. Come on. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
do you put that in your top five, top 10? Where does it land for you in terms of your favorites?
Well, it's funny you should say that actually, because or you should ask it rather, because before we did this, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go back. I ranked all of the Beach Boys albums maybe like
Oh,
2 years ago. Yeah, so I did it over three posts. I did on Instagram. I did, 30
yeah, I
to
remember that.
30 to 20, 20, 30 to 21, to,
Yeah.
20 to 11, and then the top 10. And I went back and looked at it and I thought, where the hell Smile? Like I didn't put Smile in there. So for me back then, I was thinking, well, it's not a studio album in that sense,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have it in the countdown I did, but when I think about it, it's up there with Pet Sounds for me. It's like Pet Sounds is number one, and Smiles two, just for the sheer like scale of it, and
Yeah.
the experimentalness of it. It's just so out there, and like there's so much has been like poured into it, isn't it? It's just it's such a labor of love, and
Yeah.
in the same way Pet Sounds was, it just never got finished. Is the sad thing, but it's even more work went into that, and it shows. Like you tell me anything that sounds like Smile, nothing
There's
does,
nothing.
does it?
Yeah.
It's
It is its own
yeah,
little world and no one will ever touch it.
exactly,
Um,
exactly. It's unreal to me. So
so you mentioned Brian's work ethic a little bit there with how densely layered the songs are and the construction of
yeah.
everything. How much he pushed himself to reach a new album. If
Mm.
Smile had come out, do you think he would have bettered that on the next album? Do you think he would have put too much pressure on himself and things wouldn't have happened the way they did?
Yeah, I do. So I think obviously like going back to what we were just saying about it being commercial success and all that kind of thing, I don't think it would have been particularly. Critics would have loved it, I'm sure, but
Yeah,
sales wise, maybe not. But if it hadn't kind of ended the way it did, then I'm sure there would have been at least one more album, of that
yeah,
kind, of that ilk, and maybe that would have been the one they got right, and then that was, but by that time maybe the rest of the music world would have, was on the same page. You'd have had Sergeant Pepper, and you've got all of these other more sort of avant-garde albums at that time, and it would have slotted right in then. And I think that would have been something to, yeah, something that could have been something special, like if that had happened. And we'll
yeah.
never know, but
That's that's something I've thought about a lot lately because I've been asking that question to everyone, and everyone's kind of had the same reaction, which is interesting.
Mhm.
I almost feel like, between Brian sort of stopping everything in early May, late April of '67, and then the
Uh-huh.
release of Smiley Smile in September, there's a huge chunk of time in between there where Heroes and Villains comes out as a single in July. But like, I almost feel like when you play the Smile album, yeah, there are parts that don't have words or
Yeah.
there are fragments. By the end, it kind of falls apart a little bit before it gets to good vibrations. Like,
Uh-huh.
they could have just put it out. Even if Brian was completely disinterested in it, they could have just put it out.
That's a
And
good point. Yeah.
even if he didn't care at that point, just to deliver the album and have it exist, I think people would have seen it for what it was and not what it hadn't been, I guess, the inner vision of finalizing it wasn't
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But the audience wouldn't know any different. They'd hear this new album and take it as a new
Exactly.
album. So,
They've not got the years and years of, articles and research and all of that
right.
kind of stuff. It would just be the next album. This is what it is.
Yeah, and I think it would have worked even if it wasn't finished. Maybe take off a song just to
Mhm.
shorten it up a little bit, make it a little bit more concise, but it
Yeah.
was almost done. They were
Yeah.
so close. Just put it
It's
out, So it's weird that
frustrating.
like they scrapped the whole thing to just do something completely. It's another classic what if story in the Beach Boys tale, but
Yes.
it could have just
There are
come out.
lots of them. There
Yeah.
are lots of them. And that's a really good point. Like that would have been something, eh? Like if that had come out
Yeah.
there,
I mean,
what happened?
if it had come out, do you think we would have gotten Sunflower and Surfs Up and Holland? Do you
That's a
think the
good
trajectory
question
would have
as
been
well.
different?
It could have been, yeah, yeah. I mean, if if things had been different and it was successful, if it was released and it was successful, possible, or maybe, like I said, like a third album, you know, another album came out in the same kind of vein,
Yeah.
and that was the one that broke through. You know, you most likely wouldn't have Brian then like step back, would you, and let everyone else kind of get involved. I'm sure it's somewhere down the line that would have happened.
Yeah.
More,
Right.
it happens with most bands, to
Yep.
some degree. If there's talent within the rest of the band, it comes through eventually, doesn't it?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but it's just, I don't think it would have happened then. Would it have maybe happened by the 70s, and then we'd have had our Sunflower Surfs Up, you know, era? Like maybe we
Yeah.
wouldn't have got the, your Friends and your Smiley Smile, that kind of, those albums.
Yeah.
But it's because Sunflower and Surf's Up are very much of the time, aren't they? They sound more like a 70s album.
Speaking
So
of that,
mm,
when the Beach Boys signed to Warner's, they had a clause in their contract saying, "Hey, Warner's will give you this $50,000 advance, but you got to put out Smile by 1973." That was they didn't
really,
tell Brian that. Everyone else signed and said, "Okay, no problem." Obviously, May 1st of 73 rolls around. There's no album, so they owed Warner that money back.
yeah,
If they had put out Smile by that due date, would it have been too little, too late? Do you think it would have been really it just wouldn't gel or fit with 1973? It was way too much of 1967, or how do you think it would have been received at that time?
yeah. It's very different time,
The
isn't it?
music scene in general, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Um, that's a difficult question, really. Like, I think I don't know. I'm not too sure about the timeline, but I mean, was there a lot of talk about Smile between that time? You know, were people still hankering for it, or was there an audience? Were the fans of the time still talking about it?
Yeah, it was still kind of around because obviously they picked a couple songs off of Smile for the subsequent albums at that point, so people
Yeah,
knew sort of where these
yeah,
things were coming from. Um, and then in 72, Carl and I think Steven Desper, the engineer,
hmm,
they cut together Smile tapes and made safety copies of the Smile tapes because they wanted to put the album out. So they worked
uh-huh,
on it.
uh-huh.
It just never happened. And it just blows my mind to think they put that much effort in again to make these safety tapes and everything else, and then
Yeah,
still
and it
nothing.
doesn't
It's like
happen. Yeah,
classic
yeah.
Beach Boys story, man.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there'll be plenty of fans at the time, but the music scene as a whole, would it fit in? Probably not.
I don't know. I mean, that's
Yeah, how do you feel? Like, what do you think?
I don't think it would have fit. I mean, that 5 year difference, those were such in crazy music times where things changed every year back then. These
Yeah,
days you could probably get away with it. If you made something 6 or 7 years ago, it could probably just work now because music doesn't change that much anymore. But back
yeah,
then,
yeah,
everything was different every 6 months. So if you put out this groovy psychedelic album in 1973 that sounded like 1967, people would have been like, "We don't do acid anymore. We just smoke weed now."
yeah.
It would have been different.
I think you're on it there, really.
Yeah.
It wouldn't, it would, yeah. But by the masses, I don't think it would be, wholly accepted. But it's an interesting thought that it could have happened.
I mean,
Yeah,
they did the smart move. I think that they chose the smart move by picking songs from Smile to use for their albums, like "Cool Cool Water." I mean, granted,
yeah,
that kind of basically a late '67 song, but it started with Smile. That works on Sunflower. Surf's
yeah,
Up works beautifully on the Surf's Up album, I think.
yeah.
Um, and then the end of 2020 is just a that album's a mixed bag anyway. So who cares? Throw anything in there. But
Yeah, no, we know.
put Surfing
I,
USA on it at this point. I mean, I like the album, but it's wonky. Um,
I've got
so
my criticisms of 2020. Won't go there.
it's really strange to think of Smile coming out at any time after 67. And funny enough, in the late 70s, there was actually going to be this briefly was brought up. Bruce was like, let's make like a Smile montage for a song or two to put on the Light album. Which,
Really?
yeah, which at that point they were all kind of like, it's way too old at this point. It would sound real stupid now. Like,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
at least put the disco song out and see what happens there.
the disco song.
Give it a
Oh my
go.
yeah, yeah. This stuff's way too old. But the disco song from what was it, Wild Honey?
Yeah.
The song from Wild Honey, we'll retool that from yeah, '68 or whatever it
Disco's
was.
not going anywhere. Disco's here forever. Um, so with the guys performing at that time in the 60s, how do you
Mm.
think they would have handled some of these tracks live if they had to pick a couple from the album to promote it? What do you think they would have chosen in 67, 68? And how do you think it would have gone over with the audience? Because we know they did Heroes and Villains
They've done a
once in
few,
a while.
yeah, did a couple, didn't they? But yeah, it's hard again because unless you tour in the whole album, uh, do many of those songs fit into a set list? You know, there's a few that would.
Yeah.
You've got obviously you've got Good Vibrations, Heroes and Villains is a good one,
Yep.
uh, but does something like are you gonna like stop mid gig and like suddenly do Fire? Hilarious cow, and then jump into fun, and then it's it's contextually like they don't fit brilliantly into like there would be a couple like I think um they could weave the kind of bicycle rider theme in and out of various other tracks and do
That's
little
cool.
it's I mean that's a theme of the album that right? You hear
Right.
it all the way through,
Right.
and you pick a couple of tracks that have got that, and heroes and villains, and and you can make something of that. You can keep jumping, and maybe that would work. But it's a different. I mean, a lot of that stuff would be hard to do, live. I think the way they were set at the time. I mean, I don't know how big their touring band was back then, but
They were just starting to add horns at that point, and
yeah,
Devil Dragon was joining them on stage for piano and stuff. So they were starting to build it more. But I mean, like, can you imagine like what the Who did for Tommy, where they'd come out, play a couple greatest hits, play all of Tommy, and come back and do a couple more greatest hits. It would blow my mind to think of them coming on stage being like, all right, here's three or four surf songs, and then play Smile, and then come back and be like, all right, here's Help Me Rhonda, good night.
I know it's
Doesn't
weird.
work.
It's chalk and cheese, isn't it? They're
Yeah.
completely different things. It's yeah. I mean, if they toured the whole album, that'd be great.
Can you
That would be
imagine?
cool.
God,
You know.
I mean, it was unheard of. I mean, Tommy was kind of the first time that really
Yeah.
happened. But again, the Beach Boys could have been ahead of the curve with that, being like, "Look, we love this new album. Here it is."
Yeah. Yeah.
Which just it
That
wouldn't
I
have
mean,
worked. Pop shows were 45 minutes back then. See ya. Here's the hits. Bye.
it really is that was how they were that short.
Oh, they were short. Things didn't start to change until like Cream and the Who and Zeppelin came out, and they
Yeah.
played for
Because
6 hours.
those early '70s Beach Boys gigs, they're long, right?
They
Like
grew at that point because everyone else was doing it.
the
Yeah.
one on the new set is got a hefty track
Oh
list.
yeah. Yeah. I
You
mean,
know.
that was people were just more invested in like the experience of the show. It wasn't just like, here's 12 hits right in a
Yeah.
row, barely any banter. See ya, next band comes on. Things
Mm.
changed. It's but FM radio in America changed all that. You start hearing album tracks on the radio, not just pop singles. But
Uh-huh.
um, when it comes to introducing a fan to SMiLE, if you were to meet someone today and they said, "Hey, man, I love the Beach Boys. I've got a couple of their records. I've got like All Summer Long. I've got Pet Sounds. I've got a couple of greatest hits." Would you welcome them to SMiLE right off the bat, or would you give them something else as like a gateway to SMiLE?
Well, I think Pet Sounds is Pet Sounds and Good Vibrations. To me, is a gateway to Smile. It's a natural progression in the album and the single, and then Smile on
Yeah,
from there. And if they've listened to Pet Sounds, if they're only listening to pre Pet Sounds, I'd probably say listen to Pet Sounds first because even that to me would like for me Pet Sounds when I was working my way through the two for ones and I got to Pet Sounds. That was when everything like changed, and for me, listening to them, I was very like casually like into the hits and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And I listened to Pet Sounds. I remember the first time listening to it, just thinking, "What?
yeah.
What is this?" Like and if I'd skipped Pet Sounds and gone straight to SMiLE, I would have been really
Oof.
confused. it would have been so confusing. But
Yeah,
pet sounds, I think if you can get into and digest pet sounds, and then you can appreciate good vibrations afterwards, then I think it leads in nicely to SMiLE, really.
yeah,
You know, and maybe if people have dabbled a little in the later stuff, like it what I say later, like the 70s, early 70s kind of stuff,
yeah,
then as long as you can get your head around the idea that they're not a surf band by this point,
right.
then you're there, you're halfway there, aren't you? Really, it's still going to be weird the first time you listen to Smart. Nothing's going to
Yeah.
prepare you for
I mean, that
that.
was that was my experience when I got Smiley Smile for the first time in high school.
Oh,
I
it's so
heard,
strange.
I knew all their other, early '60s stuff. I had Pet Sounds, and I had some of their, um, I had my mom's tape of Carl and the Passions, which I hadn't listened to too much. But when I first heard Smiley Smile, I was like, "This is the Beach Boys. This
Yeah,
is awesome!" I was like, "Who the
yeah,
hell thought they can do this? Like, where's more of that?" And that led me down the rabbit hole more for Smile stuff. So I mean, I
yeah.
would think Smiley Smile could be a gateway drug to
It
Smile.
is, to be fair, yeah, it is. And I've put people onto Smiley Smile because I'm, I love kind of surprising people when they go, "Oh, you into the Beach Boys? What, like Surfing USA and all that stuff?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I love all that stuff,
Yeah,
but
it's great.
listen to this." And then you put on something like, Wind Chimes, and they're like, "What the hell?"
I've I've done that for years. If I like, meet new friends or something, they come over to put records on, I'll be like, let me put some Beach Boys on for you. They're like, oh, really? And I'm like, no, 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 hang on. There's a song called She's Going Bald. It's gonna blow your mind. It's like-
Everything on that Smiley Smile is like one of my favorite albums.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
And I'm kind of thankful in a way that Smile didn't come out because we got Smiley Smile for it. Like
Very true.
it's
Yeah.
I, they never did anything like it after, and it's a real it's just a trip. Like the whole album is strange, and
I I always forget that Good Vibrations is on that album. I always forget
yeah,
every
yeah,
single time I play it because it doesn't
yeah,
fit. That's the one song that doesn't fit on that album for me. It's like, why is Good Vibrations on here?
yeah. It doesn't. I agree.
It was
Yeah,
a choice. It needed a home, so they put it onto an album because it was just a
of
single.
course.
But
Which is what they should have done with Breakaway because that needed a home bad. But
bad timing with Breakaway. If they had stayed with Capitol, I guarantee it would have been on their next album. But they
yeah,
moved labels and they didn't want to bring it with them probably, so they
and
couldn't
that's
do
one of
it.
my that's what I think my favorite single.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that. It's a
Yeah,
great song, man.
really like it.
Awesome song.
Mm.
Um, Sean, this has been so much fun chatting about Smile
It's
with you.
been
Any parting thoughts that you want to impart to fans, either getting into the record for the first time, overall view of the record itself? What you got?
God, I've got so many things. I've got, I could talk for hours about Smile, but I'll keep it brief. I'll just say that, what do I say? How do you sum up Smile? Uh, it's probably one of the most rewarding albums you can listen to. I think, like, if you, and it kind of, it helps if you know a bit about it firsthand. I think, like, if you know a bit more about how it was made and the background to that, and
Yeah,
the circumstances around it, it kind of hypes it up for you. But as I said earlier, the music matches the hype. So hype yourself up and kind of digest as much as you can about the album, and then give it a listen if you haven't already. And if maybe you've listened to it and you didn't get it, go back and have another listen because it's well worth your time. It's just there's so much to discover on there, really. It's like you were saying earlier, so many layers, and you know
right.
you, you can spend I don't know how many hours of music is on the SMiLE sessions, and you just get all these little snippets, and it's unbelievable, really. Like it's probably the most in depth, complicated album they ever put out, and it's great. I love it. That's all I can
Perfectly
say,
said.
really. Just have a listen. Yeah,
Perfectly
see what
said,
you're
man.
missing out.
Well, there are links below to follow Sean on Instagram, and you have a YouTube channel as well. Dude,
I do. It's very inactive, but
okay,
I will be getting back to that. So yeah,
awesome.
you can just
Okay, I'll put that down below so people can give you a follow on there.
thank you.
And then your Instagram too. Sean posts awesome pictures. His layouts on Instagram are just fantastic to look at.
Thank you.
Makes everyone makes me want to take better pictures. Like I can't do it.
You wouldn't. Yours are good. Yours are good.
This is me standing outside holding a record. Whatever. But Sean, man,
What
thank you
people
so,
want to
so much
see.
for being here. This has been great.
No, thank you. Thank you again for having me. It's been real fun. I really
Thanks,
enjoyed
man.
it. Cool. Take care.